Normally on this channel, right after I make my winners predictions for the upcoming season, I try and predict where every driver will finish for that year. And so today, I'll be continuing that tradition by placing my bets as to where every driver will finish this 2023 NASCAR Cup Series season. And I'll also be taking a look at where you guys think every driver finishes as well. Now look, it's obviously very difficult to accurately predict where every single driver finishes, especially before any racing action happens, but that's the fun of making these kinds of videos, which is what we're going to have today. And hey, you never know, I might just get at least one right by season's end. And the driver I'm pretty confident that will finish in their place is Cody Ware, who I have finishing 34th, and you guys do as well. I don't think I need to give an in-depth explanation. I don't expect Cody Ware to light the world on fire this 2023 season. So far we're still in agreement here, because in 33rd I have Ty Dillon, and you guys do as well. To be honest, I don't expect Ty Dillon to do anything with the team he's moving to this year, Spire Motorsports. And I don't expect Spire Motorsports to make huge gains in 2023. I'll talk about this a little with Corey LaJoie, and this is definitely going to be a theme for some of the drivers I'm ranking lower than what some of you all might be ranking, but there's just too many competitive cars, too many competitive drivers, and too many teams making massive improvements and massive strides in the right direction. And because of that, I think Spire gets left in the dust, especially Ty Dillon. You know, Ty Dillon's numbers at Petty GMS were by no means good, only racking up one top 10 with an average finish of 22.6, ultimately finishing 29th in the points. And that's pretty shocking when you consider what his teammate was doing. Blame the car, blame the inexperience in his team, which there probably was, seeing how they were a new entry, blame whoever. But the point is that was a mid-pack team, and he did basically nothing. Now he's going to a backmarker team, and things are going to improve. I'm sure the environment and the culture will be good for Ty, but I'm sorry, this might be a little too harsh, but I'm not expecting much. Next, in 32nd, we have Corey LaJoie. You guys predicted Corey LaJoie finishing 32nd as well. I know I said he would grab that elusive win, but if you're not in the top 30 in points, you don't get to be in the playoffs. And I think my reasoning for him getting his first career win was pretty sound. But as for my reasoning for him finishing 32nd in points, well, last year he scored his first top 5, and he also scored one top 10, with an average finish of 24.3, marginally best of his career, which is by no means good, especially considering the expectations that some people had for Spire potentially taking a step forward. I think they'll get a win. They're inching very close to victory lane. I mean, in 2021, they nearly won the Coke 0400, and in 2022, they nearly did it at Atlanta in the summer. But unfortunately, I don't see them improving in terms of performance, especially considering the field is only continuing to grow stronger. In 31st, I have Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I know, a bit of a shocker. You guys predicted Todd Gilliland finishing in 31st. Stenhouse throughout his entire career has been a top 25 driver, but I don't think that continues this year. I think Ricky Stenhouse Jr. has a disastrous season, and JGG Doherty Racing has a disastrous season as well. Now his stats last year are nothing to scoff at, with one top 5 and 5 top 10s, and an average finish of 22.8, which is similar to his 2020 performance. One stat that is concerning is he had the most DNFs in the field at a whopping 9. But bear in mind that after the first 10 races of 2022, he was sitting 31st in points and legitimately looking like a Rick Ware driver. And bear in mind that most of the top 10s and top 5s were questionable. Auto Club, there was a late race restart, and some of the stronger cars early on in the day got taken out. Most of the top 10 and most of the top 5 finishers of that day were not the top 10 best cars in the field. Dover, they gambled on strategy and finished second. Darlington and Charlotte turned into attrition races. The only top 10 that I'm going to give Stenhouse a ton of credit for is the one at Kansas in the spring. I was there in person, and he legitimately had a fast car weaving his way by traffic, and he had a top 10 car there in the fall. So they do have speed at some of these tracks, but at the tracks they have speed, they don't have the finishes, and at the tracks they have the finishes, they don't necessarily have the speed. I think it all balances out, and Lady Luck leads the team. On top of that, he has a new crew chief in Mike Kelly, who yes, won back-to-back championships with Ricky in the Nationwide Series, but this is also the same crew chief who Stenhouse finished 19th and 27th with in Cup in 2013 and 2014. Kelly's been out of the crew chief role for a while, so I just don't see him steering the ship in the right direction. In 30th, I have Todd Gilliland, and you guys have Harrison Burton. The 38 car is seemingly the ugly duckling in front of Motorsports, as it's never won a race. Looking at the stats in front of me, looking at the one top 5, the 2 top 10s, and the pretty solid average finish of 23.2 that he had in 2022, I'm having a hard time convincing myself that he's going to beat the drivers ahead of him. In 29th, you guys put Ricky Stenhouse Jr., but I have Harrison Burton finishing in this spot. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, Harrison's 2022 season was, quite frankly, atrocious. With one top 5, 2 top 10s, and an average finish of 22.8, it's an eyesore to look at these statistics, knowing he's driving a Wood Brothers car that had ran really good in years prior. Burton really only finished 27th because the guys behind him suffered extenuating circumstances. Ty Dillon suffered a dose of Ty Dillon, which didn't help his performance. Kurt Busch was concussed. Todd Gilliland is a fellow rookie, so cut him some slack. And Corey LaJoie, who was driving for Spire Motorsports. I think he has the talent, and I think he'll continue to improve and hone in on that potential. It's obviously there, and I think we'll begin to see Burton coming into his own at Wood Brothers here in the next couple of years. I don't want to make it sound like he's going to be duking it out with the big dogs this 2023 season, but what I'm saying is he'll make less of those rookie mistakes that I believe cost him dearly throughout the many races last season. In 28th, I have Eric Almirola. Another year of me underestimating Almirola's talents. Credit where credit is due, Almirola wasn't bad last year. Now look, his 2 top 5s and 7 top 10s, as well as his average finish of 17.8 and points finish of 20th, marked the worst year of his Stewart-Haas racing stint. To mark the first time Almirola missed the playoffs since he joined this team. But to his credit, he was in the top 15 in the regular season points for most of the year. At one point, he was as high as 12th during around June. Now he fell off towards the end of the summer, which is why I have him finishing so low in the standings. Again, there are just too many good cars ahead of him. Almirola isn't getting any younger, and if we're really being honest, I don't expect these next 2 years to be competitive. I hate to say this, but he's really just a placeholder until Ford, and more specifically SHR, can actually develop some homegrown talent for the long haul. In 27th, I have Frontrunner Motorsports' Michael McDowell, but you guys have Ryan Preece finishing this spot. McDowell is another driver who had a breakout season in 2022, but for the second year in a row, McDowell's crew chief gets snagged by a different team. Drew Blickensderfer leaving was probably a blessing in disguise, but Blake Harris? That's a massive blow to McDowell, and I'm sure Travis Peterson and him will have some chemistry, but I'm not expecting much. I think he'll be solid, but I think they'll score less top 5s and less top 10s than last year. There are ample opportunities for him to score a win, but unfortunately, I actually don't think it'll happen. In 26th, you guys have Michael McDowell, but I have Ryan Preece finishing this spot. Some might be surprised that I put Preece this low. This is one spot lower than Cole Custer finished last year. Surely Preece can beat him. But like I've reiterated in this video, the competition is more than we've seen. There are 34 charters with 34 full-time drivers, which is a lot. I don't think Preece will have a disastrous season, but I just have a hard time putting him in front of the names we've already mentioned. I think he'll have those flashes of brilliance. Brilliance that in a couple of years from now will materialize into a fringe playoff threat. But seeing how this is only his first year with SHR, seeing how he hasn't been full-time in Cup for well over a year, I'm going to make the safe bet by putting him here. In 25th, you guys have Justin Haley, which I'm a little bit surprised about because I have Austin Dillon, which is probably surprising for all of you. I'm not going to lie, I was genuinely impressed with Austin Dillon last year. Take away the win because I think we can all admit that was about as fluky as they get. But look at the 1 top 5, 11 top 10s, and an average finish of 16.5, and a points finish of 11th. He beat Austin Cindric, Kyle Busch, his teammate Tyler Reddick, Kevin Harvick, and Alex Bowman in the playoffs. Blame him for stealing a spot away from Martin Truex Jr. all you want, but if both of them were in the playoffs, they both get eliminated in the first round, and Dillon would probably have the better average finish, seeing how the 19 had DNFs at Darlington and Bristol. Now, much like guys like Cole Custer, Austin Dillon is not the kind of driver who makes huge improvements or huge drop-offs in performance. He just kind of sits around in the top 15 and finishes there. But as I've echoed in this video, other teams are coming out with much bigger and arguably better improvements. Now, Dillon is going to have a lot of eyeballs on him next year because his teammate is going to be Kyle Busch. Yes, that Kyle Busch will be his teammate next year. Having the same amount of NASCAR National Series championships is where the similarities end, because the two couldn't be further apart from each other. Personally, I'm going to be very curious as to how Austin Dillon does. In the last couple of years, it seems RCR has tried to make him their brand driver, despite teammates outrunning him. Now, it's no secret that Kyle Busch is going to carry and sell the RCR brand like you've never seen before, and that he's going to be the number 1 driver. Dillon is going to have to embrace the role of being outrun by Kyle Busch a lot of the times. How will he handle that? That to me is an interesting question, with what's sure to be an interesting answer. RFK Racing. RFK had the strangest 2022 season because it felt like they had a breakout season while simultaneously having a terrible season. You guys seem to agree because you have Brad Keselowski finishing this spot. Now, they opened up the season by sweeping the duels at Daytona, but then they just kind of disappeared for a bit until Brad had a great run at Bristol Dirt and Chris Buescher won the pole at Dover. And from here, I want to talk about Chris Buescher specifically because in my opinion, 2022 was a breakout season for the Texan. He nearly won Sonoma, he nearly won Richmond, and he did win at Bristol, and it seemed like every other week he'd finish like 9th or 10th, and you wouldn't really know it. His 3 top 5s and 10 top 10s, as well as an average finish of 17.9 are impressive. But while I'll give Chris Buescher credit for being good last year, I can't say he was great. Many might pick him to make the playoffs, and I think that could happen, but I think he just has an okay year, not really improving laterally, and just sort of gets drowned out by the dense midfield. In 23rd, we both have the young up-and-coming talent and last year's Xfinity champion Ty Gibbs. Now, whether this move is premature or not remains to be seen, but I think 2023 will be a big test for the grandson of Joe Gibbs. Firstly, I know it's been a couple of months, but Ty Gibbs' father, Coy Gibbs, passed away at the end of 2022. I'm sure the emotions of it all has settled down a bit for the young Ty Gibbs, but when he pulls through the garage stalls in the Daytona 500, an important figure in his life and his team's history will be missing. I don't know how JGR and Ty Gibbs will handle Coy's absence, but when in doubt, history often tells us the answer. In 2004, Hendrick Motorsports lost some of their best people, including guys like Randy Dorton and Ricky Hendrick. And while the moment was hard on everybody, they came out of it stronger and nearly won the championship that year. And so while Coy's passing was hard on everybody, and certainly on Ty Gibbs, I think he'll come out of it much stronger. Now let's move over to the competition side of things. He'll be running with the best in the Cup Series, and Gibbs is known to be aggressive and sometimes let that immature side of him show. 2023 will be a learning curve. I don't expect him to win, and I don't think the expectation for him should be to win. The only thing JGR should expect for him is to learn and mature. He'll lead a lot of laps, and he'll get to top 10 here and a top 5 there. But through that all, Ty Gibbs should soak in as much information to hopefully one day become a Cup champion. And Ty Gibbs has what many other drivers would dream of: time. He's 20 years old, the same age as William Byron was in 2018 when he made his debut. Byron didn't set the world on fire in his first year, but since then, he's learned and he's improved, and I think we'll see the same out of Gibbs. For JGR, there'll be some short-term pain, having one car miss the playoffs for the third time in 4 seasons, and quite frankly have a dismal season for their standards. But once Ty develops, the long-term gain will be something to behold. Many might say this is a little bit too low for his JGR car, but in my humble opinion, Ty Gibbs isn't fully developed. Look at his 22.9 average finish at 2311 in Cup last year. Even if you adjust those stats a tick higher when trying to predict his stats in a JGR car, they're still really low. Now don't get me wrong, I don't think him moving up to the Cup Series is a bad move. Being thrown into the pool and learning how to swim is the best way to figure out this next-gen car. Sitting in the Xfinity Series dominating with one of the best cars on the grid in a completely different race car than the Cup Series is running isn't going to help him. So while this year will be a struggle, he will be learning and maturing, and I think those should be the primary goals this year. I'm probably being a little bit too harsh on RFK Racing, because I have Brad Keselowski finishing in 22nd. You guys have Noah Gragson finishing in 22nd though. Brad Keselowski had an abysmal season for Brad Keselowski's standards in 2022, but the thing that I think is unfair to Brad and RFK is we're comparing him now to how he was at Team Penske. Team Penske is a championship level organization, and Brad was extremely good there, but RFK is a completely different team that right now isn't on the level that Penske is. Last year was Keselowski's rookie year in this new chapter of his racing career as a whole. He finished with 1 top 5, and it could have been 2 had he not been DQ'd at Martinsville, and 6 top 10s, with an average finish of 19.2, as well as collecting a pole at Texas. He also received a 100-point penalty, which basically ended their season right from the start. Okay, not good, but it could certainly have been worse. In 2023, they're going to build off of that. It won't be as rapid of a growth as a Trackhouse or a 2311, because you're not just starting a brand new winning culture, rather changing an old winning culture. But I think Brad will slowly improve this year, and to me, improvement over last year is finishing 22nd in points with a few more top 5s and top 10s, as well as snagging a win at the last Great Coliseum. In 21st, you guys have Austin Dillon, but I have a little bit of a shocker: Chase Briscoe. Briscoe's luck was unrivaled last season. He made it to the playoffs off a win at Phoenix, despite having a drought of top 5s and top 10s heading into Darlington, and capitalized on the issues of drivers ahead of him to advance. He capitalized on other drivers' issues again in the round of 12, and advanced to the round of 8. And the guy nearly won Martinsville, and was in prime position to make the championship 4. And if he did, he might have won the championship, as he was the only car that could really contend with the Penske cars of Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano at Phoenix in the fall. Unfortunately, despite scoring the 7th most points in the playoffs, and despite recording 6 top 5s and 10 top 10s with an average finish of 17.3, which is very good for Briscoe, I think he misses the playoffs. Barring the stretch in the playoffs where they turned on the wick really out of necessity, he was nowhere to be found most weeks in the summer. I don't think he'll necessarily have a bad year, but I'll be surprised if Lady Luck gives him a gracious hand and all the stars align for the 2nd year in a row. It's going to be a while before Briscoe makes that deep of a playoff run again. In 20th, you guys have Bubba Wallace, but I have Kevin Harvick. Stewart-Haas Racing's fall from grace has been, quite frankly, something to behold. The days where they were dominating every week and winning every week seem like a distant memory heading into 2023. You have an aging Kevin Harvick and Eric Almirola, an inconsistent Chase Briscoe, and you also have Ryan Preece. But I'm not here to determine what they should do. I'm here to predict their fate because of what they didn't do in terms of developing homegrown talent. So I think in 2023, all 4 cars from the organization missed the playoffs, including Kevin Harvick. I'll address Harvick in a second, but let's talk about this organization as a whole. I think 2023 for SHR is going to be a turning point in their history. I think they're going to go winless and are going to find themselves at a crossroads for talent. But one driver who isn't thinking about the future is Kevin Harvick. 2023 will be Harvick's last year, but I think it will be his worst year in his time at Stewart-Haas Racing. Yes, he got the 2 wins, but let's not forget before Michigan and Richmond, Harvick was sitting 18th in points in prime position to miss the playoffs. He had strong cars at both those races, don't get me wrong, but I don't think you find that stroke of momentum 2 years in a row. So yes, I think Harvick has another winless season. I don't think you're going to see a Jeff Gordon type final season out of Happy. In 19th, you guys have Chris Buescher, but I have Justin Haley finishing in this spot. Now, Haley's season as a whole was pretty good last year, with 3 top 5s, 4 top 10s, and an average finish of 18.4. But in the playoffs, he turned on the stove and burned the house down. Kaulig Racing is slowly but surely positioning their organization for greatness. The hype is real, and I bought into it. This entire video has really just been gauging the hype around these specific teams. But on a more serious note, I do think the momentum from the end of last season carries over into this season, and Justin Haley comes oh so close to making the playoffs. AJ Allmendinger is really going to push Justin Haley to up his game, and I think that competitive spirit between father and son is going to be pretty interesting to watch this season. Now in 18th, you guys had AJ Allmendinger, but I have Noah Gragson finishing in this spot. There's a lot of hype around this rowdy, 13-time Xfinity Series winner straight out of the Wild West. Gragson is going to be extremely fun to watch next season. He'll be bold and aggressive, and I'm sure we're going to have lots to say about him when the season's done, whether that's good or bad. He's ready for the leap, there's no doubt about it, and I think he'll show the entire field what he's really made of. My only concern with Gragson is this isn't just a huge leap up into the Premier Series of NASCAR, but it's a leap into a new team and a new environment. Cut the mullet, straighten up, button up your fire suits, tuck in your sponsored shirts, and don't even think about coming into the garage like you own the place. There are veterans and champions who've been doing this a long time. Some have been doing this racing thing even before you were born. You're in Richard Petty's team, and there's going to be a certain etiquette to abide by. Gragson is still going to be Gragson personality-wise at the end of the day, but I think we're going to see a much more polished and just an all-around different Noah Gragson in the way he goes about representing this team. And while I think this will cause some growing pains right out of the gate in terms of acclimatizing to this culture, pretty soon I think you're going to see him delivering results, especially closer to the end of the season. Petty GMS is another team who's thinking big and thinking ahead. Jimmy Johnson, yes, that 7-time champion, is coming into the organization. And while I think that'll be gold for Eric Jones, it's going to be platinum for Noah Gragson as he learns and develops. In 17th, you guys picked Kevin Harvick, but I opted for a different driver. This was a tough one, but I think Austin Cindric misses the playoffs. Cindric's rookie season was quite impressive, I won't lie. He won the Daytona 500 and had a pretty solid regular season all things considered. While him getting out of the round of 16 happened with a bit of luck, the guy used every ounce of skill to try and make it to the round of 8, and he was pretty close to his credit. His 5 top 5s and 9 top 10s, as well as an average finish of 16.3, make you want to squint your eyes in disbelief at what a rookie did. Unfortunately, as many opportunities as there are to make the playoffs for him, I don't think it happens. I don't think he'll necessarily have a bad year, but I don't see him winning in the regular season, and with other guys winning, I just think he gets shuffled out of the mix. Now we get to the drivers who I think make the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series playoffs in order of where I think they finish. Remember, even if a driver gets eliminated in the round of 16, doesn't always mean they'll finish in any position from 13th through 16th. Everyone's points are reset to 2,000, and then whatever they've collected throughout the playoffs. So I'll preface that when talking about each of these drivers. The driver who I think finishes 16th in the standings is AJ Allmendinger. You guys thought Martin Truex Jr. finishes 16th. I couldn't bring myself to put Justin Haley ahead of some of the names mentioned here, but I could for the Dinger. There are too many opportunities for AJ to win. You've got more super speedway-like tracks than we've ever seen in the Cup Series, and you've got more road courses than we've ever seen as well. Unlike Cindric, who's still young and maturing, AJ is the kind of driver who will show speed on every joint that he's good at, consistently too. I have AJ winning at a street course because of that experience he boasts. He's been extremely good at the select Cup starts he's ran, and because of that, I think making the playoffs is a bare minimum expectation I have for the team and the team should have for AJ. Now let's not think AJ is just a two-trick pony. Oh no. At Gateway and Bristol, he finished well inside the top 10, and at Homestead, he finished 3rd and probably had a car that could contend with the dominant Kyle Larson that day. Towards the end of last year, they clicked, and I began to see more and more speed consistently. There are only 3 tracks that I think he'll struggle on in Cup. Dover, New Hampshire, and Phoenix. The oblong tracks, the short tracks, the race-like intermediates are his Achilles heel. But other than those tracks, I think he'll do fine. Now why do I have him finishing 16th, bottom of the drivers in the playoffs and out of the round of 16? I think he'll do fine at Kansas and Bristol, but it's Darlington that has me concerned. A last lap crash in the spring NASCAR Xfinity Series race in the spring last year allowed AJ to finish in the top 10, which was his first one ever at the track. 0 top 10s in the Cup Series and only 2 in Xfinity. It's not a track you'd expect AJ to run well at, and I think that'll undo his title bid. Now one concern I have for AJ this season is how he's going to handle himself behind the wheel. He's a very emotional guy. When you see him win, the whole place burns down and everyone gets amped up. The man's energy is contagious, but all that emotion comes at a price, because when things don't go AJ's way, he can get a little bogged down. We've all heard it in some form, and as someone who rooted for him in Xfinity, I heard it a ton. If he was running bad, he might yell at his team, he might sound deflated and dejected, and sound completely removed from the competition. When they ask him how he can make the car better, he might say, I don't know, just fix it. In the Cup Series, you can't do that. You lose far more times than you win. That's just sports, that's competition. Personally, I'm going to be curious as to how AJ reacts when things don't go his way. I love the sparks to fly out of him, but those sparks should be in check. In 15th, you guys put Austin Cindric, but for me, I have Bubba Wallace finishing here. Bubba Wallace's 2022 season was pretty impressive, all things considered. 5 top 5s and 10 top 10s with an average finish of 18.3, as well as a win at Kansas, as well as taking the 45 car to the round of 12 in the owner standings. It was very, very impressive. There were some negatives though. His pit crew at the beginning of the season was all anyone could talk about in regards to the 23 team. Every race, it would seem like they rolled out a top 10 car, only to flub on a pit stop. They got that figured out in July, and things very noticeably improved. He went from having a string of subpar finishes to having a streak of top 10s and top 5s and having a ton of momentum in August. Unfortunately, it was a little too late, but those bursts of speed give me hope that they will make the playoffs this year as long as they dial in the little things and rid themselves of any inconsistencies. To me, Bubba Wallace is a Jamie McMurray, Clint Boyer type talent. He has the potential to go a long way. He certainly has the talent to do so. I think he'll grab a win next year, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he got more than one. But the last thing I want to address is the pressure that he'll experience if he makes a postseason. Some drivers are cool and calm as a cucumber could possibly be, such as Chase Elliott or Ross Chastain, at least from a driver standpoint. Bubba, on the other hand, wears his head over his sleeves, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It gives him the fire to push forward and do better than he did in the previous week. But there are some negatives about it, such as what he did to Las Vegas or the radio communication to his team in Nashville. These are isolated cases that I hope he doesn't repeat again, but what these showed me is that while he has a ton of talent, he does need to get his emotions in check sometimes. When you're going for a championship like I think he'll be going for next year, you're going to experience immense pressure. Pressure is a privilege, at least if you can handle it, and to me, that's one thing Bubba's going to have to hone in on. Once he does, I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. In 14th, you guys have Eric Jones, but I have Alex Bowman. I have Bowman making it to the round of 12, but I think he drops off towards the end of the year and ultimately finishes 14th. 2023 is going to be a crucial year for the Tucson, Arizona native. William Byron has a contract through 2025, Chase Elliott has a contract through, well, let's be honest, forever, and Kyle Larson is here through 2026. Bowman, on the other hand, is entering into a contract year. He's been here before, think back to 2020, when his future was a bit of an unknown, and he's going through it again. I think he'll be here for years to come, and I expect the process to go by quickly. Hendrick isn't really a team that prolongs contract negotiations, but how will Bowman handle the waiting in the meantime? To be honest, I don't expect much out of him. Nothing in 2022 made me leap out of my couch in awe of what Bowman did last year. His 4 top 5s and 12 top 10s, as well as an average finish of 16.7 are okay, I guess. But ever since that 2020 season, we've been waiting for Bowman to finally break out, and I don't think that happens in 2023. I think he goes winless in the regular season, points his way into the playoffs, and once he's in the playoffs, I think he wins at Kansas and punches his ticket into the round of 12. That's the furthest he's ever gone in his career, and that's the furthest I think he'll go this year. One last thing is, I don't think his concussion he had at the end of 2022 is going to affect his performance. It was a while back and he's back to 100%. He ran Phoenix. I just think he has an okay year regardless. In 13th, you guys put Chase Briscoe, but I have Byron Michigan's finest in Eric Jones. Eric Jones has probably been the best hire Petty GMS has had since maybe Eric Almirola, or you could go back further to guys like John Andretti or Bobby Hamilton. Post Richard Petty, of course. He's already got the win at Darlington under his belt, and if that win happened just 1 week earlier, we'd be talking about his playoff run. Slowly but surely they've improved, and slowly but surely they will improve. 2023 is going to be a breakout season for Jones. This will be the best points result Jones will have had in his entire career. I think he'll get a win, and will be extremely competitive. He's going to be the leader of this organization with a competitive teammate by his side, and it'll be fun to watch how the two develop some chemistry. After all, they couldn't be further apart in terms of personality. Now, while I think he'll make the playoffs, I don't think he'll make it past the first round. Yes, he won Darlington and has run well there historically, but he had probably a 10th place car when you look at the race as a whole last fall. He wasn't particularly good there at Kansas or Bristol, and I think that'll undo his title bid. I have him pointing his way into the playoffs, and I think he'll do well enough to make that happen, but I don't think he'll go winless. I have him winning Talladega in the fall as an already eliminated driver. He's great at super speedways, so I don't think that's too big of a surprise. And yeah, that's about it for that Jones boy. In 12th, I have Martin Truex Jr. Now, Martin Truex Jr.'s 2022 season was absolutely atrocious. It was his worst since 2014. Yes, he unjustly missed the playoffs, but like I alluded to, if the cutoff to make it to the round of 12 was between Austin Dillon and MTJ, Dillon would get in. MTJ had 2 mechanical gremlins in the round of 16 in 2022 that would have ended his title hopes. I have him getting eliminated from the round of 16 this year just because of all that bad luck that I think carries over into this year. This next gen card just doesn't seem to favor Martin's driving style, and I think it's hit him the hardest. Let's look at Truex's stats. 4 top 5s and 15 top 10s in 2022, and he would have finished 7th in the regular season standings. That's pretty impressive until you realize most of those points are stage points. He usually qualified pretty okay, and then ran pretty good until he finished pretty bad. Execution was his Achilles heel. Look at New Hampshire last year, he dominated that race and somehow came across the line in 4th. His best finish of the entire year, 4th. The guy didn't even finish in the top 3 all season. Now my rankings are not necessarily based on speed. If it were, Truex would be in the round of 8, maybe the final 4. They're based on how I think they'll execute, and it's no secret that his execution has been hit or miss. In 2023, I think they'll win in New Hampshire. I mean, they ran well last year. I think they'll execute at least one race this season. But other than that, I don't really have high hopes for Truex. Relative to how he did in 2022, I think it'll be another disappointing season for the 2017 champ. In 11th, we both have Daniel Suarez. I think he makes the round of 12 this 2023 season. Now, I severely underestimated Trackhouse Racing last season. I had Chastain missing the playoffs, but I did have him win to my credit, and I had Suarez only making it past the round of 16. However, in reality, Suarez made it to the round of 12 and fought like a lion at the Roval to try and make it to the round of 8. I almost had him making it to that round, but I just don't think Texas or Talladega suit his driving style. He's good at road courses in general, so maybe he surprises me by winning at the Roval this year, but I don't see it happening. What I do see happening is him tick up in performance. I think he will marginally improve over 2022. In 10th, you guys predicted Kyle Busch finishing the spot, but I have Tyler Reddick, who I think makes the round of 8. Reddick's 2022 season in a lot of ways was pretty good. 10 top 5s and 15 top 10s, as well as him finally scoring a win, plus 2 more was pretty good. However, his average finish at a 17.6, as well as his points finish of 14th, was pretty low. Lower than his teammate, and pretty disappointing considering the kind of speed he had in 2020 and 2021. Inconsistency was really Reddick's Achilles heel. He had the 3rd most DNFs in the garage last year at 8, losing only to Ty Dillon and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at 9. After his round of 16 elimination, his finishes were 1st, 28th, 8th, 8th, 35th, 35th, and 23rd. This pretty much sums up his entire season just in those last couple of races. Now I think with 2311 he's going to have a lot more speed, and I think Reddick refines those rough edges that he had in 2022. 2311 Racing made the round of 12 in the owner standings, so I don't think that's too outlandish, even if Reddick has never made it past the first round. And I have Reddick winning at the Roval, thus advancing him into the next round. While Homestead does lie in the round of 12, I don't see him winning there, and you look at the other tracks, especially Martinsville, as well as the kind of competition he's up against, and I just can't place him any further. In 9th, you guys put Tyler Reddick, but I have Denny Hamlin, who I think gets eliminated in the round of 12. Looking at Denny Hamlin's 2022 season, it was a roller coaster of emotions to say the least. In the first 6 races of the season, he was hovering around 20th in points. They scored a couple wins after Coda at Richmond and Charlotte, and they crossed the start finish line in the first position at Pocono, with 2 official wins, 10 top 5s and 16 top 10s, as well as 3 poles and an average finish of 15.5. It was a pretty solid season for Hamlin. It's also worth noting that he scored the most points throughout the playoffs. But the thing is, I didn't see the Denny Hamlin we all saw from 2019 to 2021. A perennial championship contender who may not have gotten the hardware at the end of the day, but sure gave the eventual champion a run for it. The Denny Hamlin I saw last year was the same Denny Hamlin many witnessed for most of his career, a solid 5th to 10th place driver. In the regular season standings, he would have finished 9th in points, which isn't bad, but certainly isn't championship 4 caliber. Well, he's not that bad at Texas, but I don't see him winning there, and I think it's going to take a win to move him past the second round. He had one of the worst high bank superspeedway average finishes last year, so I don't think you can rely on Talladega, and Toyota as a whole was off at the road courses. I'm sorry, but I think we're going to see Denny Hamlin eliminated from the playoffs earlier than he and many Hamlin fans would want. In 8th, you guys decided to put William Byron, but I have Chase Elliott, who I think gets eliminated from the round of 8. Chase Elliott's 2022 season was a tale of 2 halves. You had his regular season, 4 wins, 10 top 5s and 17 top 10s, as well as 3 poles and an average finish of 10.5, easily worthy of being the regular season champion and the championship favorite. And then you had his playoffs, 2 top 5s, a second at Bristol and a win at Talladega, 3 top 10s, 0 poles, and a 17.5 average finish. In almost every round, Chase Elliott just barely skated his way into the next. The way he finished in the Championship 4 just encapsulated his entire season in a nutshell. He practiced and qualified well and ran well, and then it all went to hay in a handbasket when he spun off the nose of Ross Chastain and finished 28th in the race and 4th in points. It was clear by the time Phoenix rolled around that they were going to need a miracle to win the 2022 title. Many of you might have watched Race for the Championship last year, and during the episode where they summarized the round of 8, one thing stuck out to me in terms of what crew chief Alan Gustafson said during the competition meeting after Homestead. I don't have the exact quote, but he basically said they're at a crossroads in the setups they're bringing to the racetrack, and he doesn't know what they need to do. Now, while his 2022 season completely derailed towards the end, I don't think his 2023 season will be quite like that. I don't think they're going to have championship-esque speed, but I think they're going to be solid throughout the regular season, picking up 3 wins at Martinsville, Watkins Glen, and Daytona. In the playoffs, I think they do enough to make it out of the round of 16, and enough to make it out of the round of 12. But enough is not good enough, and it doesn't equate to a championship 4 berth. So I think Chase Elliott gets eliminated after the round of 8 and finishes 8th in points. They ran 20th all day at Las Vegas, finished 14th at Homestead, and were 11th on track when the checkers fell at Martinsville. They were some 5 points from being eliminated, which is a win. His 5 wins might have helped him last year, but I don't think he has that kind of help this year. The last driver I have getting eliminated from the round of 12 is Christopher Bell, who you guys decided to put in 7th as well. I think he finishes higher than the previous drivers mentioned because he wasn't particularly bad at Las Vegas before the Bubba Wallace incident, and he wasn't particularly bad at Homestead, and he showed a ton of speed at Martinsville, regardless of the fact he won it. Also, in the regular season standings, he finished 6th last year. Now let's look at the stats before I present my case for him getting eliminated. Christopher Bell had a career year last year, with a win in New Hampshire and 2 clutch wins at Charlotte Roval and Martinsville, when he was in a must-win situation. On top of that, he got 12 top 5s, 20 top 10s, 4 poles, and an average finish of 13.8 and a 3rd place points finish. Pretty good all around. However, Christopher Bell got extremely lucky. I'm going to give credit to his Martinsville win. He had a fast car and deserved that win, no doubt about it. In fact, if he didn't get collected in the Bubba Wallace-Kyle Larson scuffle, he probably would have pointed his way into the championship regardless. However, the Charlotte Roval win is one I'm going to justify in my thinking that he'll be eliminated in the round of 12. After a dismal Texas and Talladega race, Bell was in a pretty deep hole heading into the Roval. Help would come in the form of an unlikely ally, a piece of cardboard. Differing strategies were employed, chaos ensued, and Bell walked home with the win. You can get lucky once, but I don't think you can again. The round of 12 does not set up to Bell's liking well. I mean, he got eliminated here in 2021, and while the round of 8 does feature tracks that suit Bell well, you have to get there first. And in 2023, I don't think he does. Finishing 6th in points, we both have the defending series champion, old 2-timer, Joey Logano. Logano's 2022 season was very good and worthy of being a championship season. 4 wins, 11 top 5s, 17 top 10s, 4 poles, and an average finish of 13.5. Every even-numbered year since 2014 has seen Logano make the championship 4, but in the odd-numbered years, he hasn't done particularly well, at least by Logano standards. In 2015, he finished 6th in points thanks to Matt Kenseth. In 2017, he finished 17th, and in 2019, he finished 5th. And in 2021, he finished 8th in points. I think that trend continues this year, and he makes it all the way into the round of 8, only to get eliminated. It won't be a bad year, but it's not going to be as good as last year. I have him winning the All-Star race in North Wilkesboro before winning Richmond, and I think Richmond is going to be his only win on the season. So yes, I think Logano caps off the year, finishing 6th in points. We kind of traded the spots between Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin, because I have Kyle Busch finishing 5th, but you guys decided to pick Denny Hamlin. Now, KFB's 2022 season was, quite frankly, awful. One very fluky win at Bristol Dirt, 8 top 5s, 17 top 10s, and 0 poles. His average finish was 16.7, and he finished off the season 13th in points. If you would have told me in 2019 that this was the Kyle Busch we'd see 3 years from then, I would have asked you what kind of M&Ms you were munching on. But speaking of M&Ms, in 2019, nobody expected them to leave, and then Kyle Busch to subsequently leave JGR. And this is where you add the context as to why Kyle Busch's season was so bad. The JGR Kyle Busch saga was a never-ending black cloud that lasted all the way through September. Every day, fans would spend hours refreshing J-Ski in the hope of their questions being answered. Where will Kyle Busch go in 2023? What will happen to KBM? And so on and so forth. The distractions away from the track were a lot for Kyle Busch to handle. At the end of Phoenix, the guy was emotional when they asked how he felt about the whole thing ending. But if you take away those distractions, how well would he have done? And I think the answer to that question will be his 2023 performance. I think right out of the gate, Busch will struggle, kind of like how Hamlin struggled at the beginning of his 2022 season. There's going to be a lot of growing pains right out of the gate, but it doesn't take a 60-time winner long to find victory lane. I think he wins Dover, Gateway, Pocono, and Darlington. Kyle Busch adjusts to new environments extremely well. Just look at what he did to a JGR car that hadn't seen the competitive light in 5 years heading into 2008. He went on an absolute tear. I don't think we'll see that next year, but the point still stands. Kyle Busch heading to JGR in 2008 would be like him heading to the Wood Brothers. The thing is, he's heading into RCR, a race-winning organization. In 2022, they scored 4 wins and got both their cars in the playoffs. Kyle Busch isn't having to rebuild an organization like he did with the JGR 18 car. He just needs to drive. You take a talented driver and put them in a fast car, which you'll have, and the combination is deadly for the field. I think he wins the regular season championship, but as we sometimes see with the regular season champion, they falter when it matters most. I think he'll do extremely well, but I don't see them executing. The craziness of the playoffs, especially the round of 8, can and I think will cost him dearly. And part of why I don't think he'll make the final 4 is that I think the next 4 drivers will outrun him for a championship 4 spot when it gets down to it. The driver I have finishing 4th is the one that I have the least confidence in. William Byron. You guys decided to put Ryan Blaney finishing in this spot. I have the least confidence in William because I don't know how to gauge him. Last year, he had 2 wins at Atlanta and Martinsville, 5 top 5s, 11 top 10s, and an average finish of 15.6. If you were gauging him off his playoff performance or how he was at the beginning of the season, then my prediction is pretty accurate. But if you're gauging his performance off the 18 straight races with only 1 top 10, then I don't think you'd be far off saying there's a chance he could miss the playoffs entirely or wound up as a first-round exit. But I have faith that Rudy and William can rekindle some of that championship-esque speed that they had at the beginning of the season in 2022, and I have hope that they can pick off where they left off at the end of last year. Byron scored the second most points of any driver in those final 10 races, and some might forget this, but he was in prime position to make the Final Four heading into Martinsville. A botched qualifying lap in Martinsville effectively quashed his hopes of getting to Phoenix, and that leads me to my next concern. They've got to work on execution. If there's anybody that knew the routine of Byron's weekends last year, it was the 10 of us William Byron fans. In general, you would either qualify terrible, run terrible, only to finish okay, or qualify good, run good, only to finish terribly. At Homestead Miami Speedway, he got his only pole of the 2022 season and ran extremely good all day. He probably had the third best car to Truex and Larson, but my gosh, did that all go away quickly. He fell all the way to 12th and never recovered. If they're going to make it to the Championship 4, they have to stop being way too aggressive with their setups and start working on executing these races. William Byron has the speed to make it to Phoenix. I don't think anybody's denying that, but will he execute? In third, you guys put Ross Chastain, but I have the 2021 NASCAR Cup Series champion, Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson would be the first to admit this, but his 2022 season was actually pretty bad for his standards. He scored 3 wins at Auto Club, Watkins Glen, and Homestead Miami, along with 13 top 5s, 19 top 10s, 4 poles, and an average finish of 14.1. For any ordinary, run-of-the-mill driver, those aren't bad numbers. But lest we forget, Kyle Larson is no ordinary, run-of-the-mill driver. Larson had tons of speed last year. He was easily a top 5 driver last year. But the thing is, Larson and his team made tons of mistakes that ended up costing them dearly. His spotter was asleep at the wheel at Auto Club, his picker messed up a good race at Sonoma, and Larson himself messed up the Charlotte Roval and was eliminated in the round of 12 by Chase David Wayne Briscoe. And don't think I'm forgetting the weird mechanical issues that were brought to places like Darlington or Daytona. Probably the only person who didn't mess up anything was Cliff Daniels, who was too busy giving motivational speeches. Kyle Larson could have made it all the way to Phoenix, but poor execution bit them when it mattered most. Execution is really the drinking word of this Final Four. Let's go back to Larson's Homestead race. He won, which locked the 5 car into the owner's Final Four. He was well inside the top 10 of Las Vegas before that and had a really fast car, and at Martinsville, he sat on the pole and ran inside the top 5 all day. The point is, if Larson can hurdle his way past the round of 12, then he can definitely go all the way. I think we forget this, but Kyle Larson has only made the championship 4 once, and that was in 2021 when he won the whole thing. Larson's going to have plenty more of these opportunities throughout his career, and I think one presents itself in 2023. In second, this was a tough one, but I'm picking Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney's 2022 season was actually his best season in the sport. Winning isn't everything. Despite the goose egg in the wins column, he scored 12 top 5s, 17 top 10s, 3 poles, and an average finish of 13.6, and scored the most stage points in the field. On top of that, he would have finished second in the regular season standings. Ryan Blaney's knocking on the championship 4 door, and one of these days, Phoenix will let him in. I thought that would be last year, but it wasn't. But I think that will finally happen this year. He's going to have a great year, and he's going to make a deep run in the playoffs. There's no doubt about it. His main goal this season should be to make the Final Four, and I think his chances are pretty good. He was great at intermediates last year, and he's pretty good at both Martinsville races. Blaney probably could have made it had he not spun at Las Vegas and Miami. Now, many might have him going all the way to a championship, seeing how he's extremely good at Phoenix, and Penske crushed the field in the season finale last year. But since I picked him last year, I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I'm going to do that by bringing in the devil's advocate, Ross Chastain. Where do I start? Ross Chastain's rise to NASCAR prominence, his growth between 2021 and 2022 is something to behold. You shouldn't be able to just start winning and contending for championships right off the bat, but he did. In 2022, Chastain scored 2 wins, 15 top 5s, most of the field, 21 top 10s, most of the field, and a 13.3 average finish. The best way I can summarize this year for Chastain was that it was a dream season. He felt like the main character in a much larger 2022 story. Chastain made it to the playoffs for the first time in his career. He made it to the round of 12 for the first time in his career. He made it to the round of 8 for the first time in his career. He made it to the championship 4 for the first time in his career and finished second in the points, with no experience. No disrespect to the drivers I'm about to mention, but in 2021, Chastain was used to running with Michael McDowell and Chris Buescher for a top 20 or top 15. But in 2022, he was running with champions like Joey Logano and veterans like Denny Hamlin. Now, of course, this caused some growing pains, namely with Denny Hamlin, but Chastain cleaned that up towards the end of the season. it's hard to just start being competitive in your second full-time competitive season of competition because nobody wants you to be there, and this was exacerbated by the fact that Ross Chastain was looking like a serious title contender. The thing about Chastain is he's aggressive. He's not dirty, but he's aggressive. I compare him to Joey Logano. Logano was extremely aggressive and sometimes really dirty for the first couple of years of his Cup career, but once he started to balance the fine line between being aggressive but staying clean, he started winning championships. Yes, Logano has that occasional moment of dirty driving, but that's going to happen when you're aggressive. Nobody's perfect. But to me, it seems Ross Chastain has hit on that balance perfectly. At the end of last year, he wasn't running into anybody, but he was still the same old aggressive watermelon farmer we've come to know and love or hate. Sometimes that aggression is going to be applauded by the masses, such as what he did at Martinsville, and sometimes that aggression is going to be booed by the masses, such as how he refused to lift and let Chase Elliott spin off his nose. But both those instances were fair, and were by no means dirty. Now I do have some concerns for Chastain. Both his wins last year came off great execution. He was great at chipping off top 5s and top 10s, and executing well, regardless of whether he had the speed or not. But the thing is, those wins were very close to not happening. Had AJ Allmendinger and Alex Bowman done a couple things differently at COTA, he wouldn't have won. And had Eric Jones and Kyle Larson done a couple things differently at Talladega, he wouldn't win. Top 5s and top 10s are the next best thing if you can't win. But I just need to see Ross winning some more of these races on pure, raw domination. He dominated several races last year, but failed to get that win. From the eye test, Ross Chastain was the fastest car last year, and I think with experience and a year with this new team already under his belt, he's going to be deadly for the competition. I think Ross Chastain is going to go on a tear and win at least 5 races next season and win the championship. He was great at both Phoenix races last season, and I know the Trackhouse knows what they need to do differently. The future is bright if you're a Ross Chastain fan, and I think your man will be crowned the 2023 champion at season's end. Well, that's a lot of stats to digest, and I'm sure 2023 will give us quite a bit to digest by season's end. Did I rank your favorite driver a little too high or too low, or maybe just right? Where do you think everybody's going to finish by season's end? Let me know down in the comments section below, and until next time, this has been the news. I'll see ya.